I was born in Los Angeles, California, September the 4th, 1926. I didn't finish high school when I was 18 years old because they held me back 1 year in kindergarten because my English wasn't that good. So in 1944, I went in the service, and I hadn't graduated from high school. So I went in the service then and took my boot camp in San Diego. I went to the Anaheim Union High School, before that to Fremont Junior High School, and before that to elementary school, La Palma School, which a lot of the Mexican kids were bused all over from Anaheim to the segregated school of La Palma School. And I preferred to serve in the service, in a service of my choice, so I volunteered to serve in the Navy. I felt that it was more advanced, more technical, more educational to be in the Navy. I took my training in San Diego Naval Training Center. That's where I took my boot camp, so-called boot camp. And then from there, they sent me over to, when my boot camp was over, they assigned me to Camp Elliott just to be there. I was there for about 2 weeks, and then they put me on a draft, which I wound up being on the Harry F. Bauer, a destroyer mine layer, 26. There's about between 250 and 350 men on a destroyer. The ship was commissioned in the East Coast, came around the Panama Canal, was in San Diego when I was assigned to it. And at the end of my boot camp training, I went home for a 30-day leave, and I told my parents, my grandparents that raised me, if I'm not here for Christmas, I'm going to be here for New Year's. On December the 22nd is when I got assigned to the ship, and away we went all the way to the West Coast, all the way across the Pacific. Went to Hawaii and then to Okinawa and Iwo Jima. From Hawaii, we went to escort some cargo ships to Iwo Jima, and then we were there shelling the beaches and assisting the Marines in every way we could. We would get communication with some of our spotters, and they would tell us why they wanted us to shell the beach. We knocked out some trucks and some tanks and ammunition dumps and gun emplacements in Iwo Jima. And then at night, because the Marines were getting infiltrated at night by the Japanese, we would shoot star shells over the island to illuminate the island to keep the Marines safe. Well, not so, well, so they could see when the Japanese would come over. Because at night they couldn't see, and all of a sudden they were out there assassinating them and killing them. So with us selling the star shells, illuminated the island and kept the Japanese from doing that. There were some smaller ships that shot rockets, and then destroyer escorts, and then destroyers, then cruisers, light cruisers, heavy cruisers, and then the battleships, and they were all shelling the beach. And you could see the shells hitting the Mount Cherbachi. We used to call it hot rock because we didn't know the name of it. And the shells would hit and go way up in the air sometimes, then they come down and explode, or they would explode when they hit. And so we were, and then the Japanese had their guns in caves, and they would bring them out to the mouth of the cave and shoot at us. And when they did that, we could spot them, and the whole naval fleet would shoot at the mouth of the cave. And not only did we, but because they pulled their guns back inside, a lot of times we didn't knock out the gun, but we sort of sealed the entrance with all the shells hitting it. It accumulated a lot of debris in the entrance, and they couldn't really do much too much. But they still managed to get some of the debris away and still shoot at us. From there, we went to Ulithi, which was the whole Navy was gathering there and getting supplied so we could go and invade Okinawa. So from there we went to Ulithi, and in Ulithi, we were there in Ulithi until sometime in March, because we were in Okinawa on March the 25th, several days before the invasion of Okinawa. We were there was a group of islands. There is a group of islands west of the southern part of Okinawa called Koremorita. And that's a base that we were going to use to supply the main forces in Okinawa. So we went there, and we were shelling the beaches and clearing the beaches of mines, and making sure that whenever our occupation and forces would go there, that everything was going to be okay for them. So we went there, and 2 days later we came, and it looked like the whole city of St. Anne had moved in. There were telephone lines, roads, jeeps, all kind of boxes with different kind of equipment. They were there. The jeeps were in wooden boxes. There were boxes of jeeps and other kind of equipment, and there were soldiers marching all over the place. My rank was Seaman First Class, and I was assigned to the radio room. And part of my duties were being part of the gun crew, 5-inch gun crew. I was down in the magazine supplying the shell, not the shells, but the cartridges, so they would fire them. And one of my other duties, besides my regular combat, when I was at combat, was being a messenger. The messages would come in the radio room, and I would go to the different officers it pertained to. He would go to the captain, the communications officer, and whoever the message pertained to, like the gunnery officer, the communications officer, or whatever. And I would give them, all three of them would get a message. There were 3 gun turrets, and they had 2 twin guns in each turret. They were 5-inch guns, 2 5-inch guns in each. So we had 6 5-inch guns, 1 up forward, 1 amidships, and 1 in aft. And then we had 40 millimeter guns, 20 millimeter guns, and 50 caliber machine guns all around the periphery of our ship, so we could fight the kamikazes coming in. There were other kind of small boats and things like that we had to get rid of and keep an eye to make sure that our fleet was safe shelling the beaches, because they were concentrating on the beach. Some ship or small PT boat, something like a PT boat, would come around and probably sink them, so we were guarding them all and make sure that everything was quiet, and besides our regular shelling the beaches. And we were shelling the beaches, and we were communicating with our spotter. And then toward the other campaign, we were communicating with him, and all of a sudden we didn't hear him anymore. And then we heard, no fire, with a Japanese accent. So I don't know what happened to our spotter. I guess the Japanese took the walkie-talkie, what the hell walkie-talkies at that time, they had no cell phones. And so I guess they killed him and because they were jamming our circuit so we couldn't communicate with anybody. And then our bombers would come and dive bomb, and they go behind Garcia-Battle, and I'd see him go down. I said, I hope they make it, I hope they make it. And all of a sudden you'd see it come up on the other side. And then one of them was diving, and the Japanese were firing at him. All of a sudden there was an explosion up there. The airplane exploded from one of the shells. It was just debris come down, no parachute, no nothing, just little debris fell all the way down the ground. Well, they were securing Iwo Jima when we left. I saw the flag, and you could see a little flag way up on top of Garcia-Battle. You could see up there, and the whole Navy started blowing their different foghorns or what have you. And we were very, very resolved in making sure that we were victorious, because that gave us a lot of inspiration seeing the flag up there. Sure. And the Marines were going through all kind of hell down in Iwo Jima. We had to give them a lot of credit for having the flag up there and then finally defeating the Japanese. Even I, as young as I was saying, jeepers, how come the generals don't do something? We're losing too many people. Maybe we should get out of here. But that's, it was a real strategic island, because we had to protect our ships, our airplanes, B-29s going to Japan and bombing Japan, and they had to come back, and they were crashing in the ocean and everything else. And now they were landing in Iwo Jima. When we left Ulithi, the whole fleet was on its way to Okinawa. I saw the ships as far as you could see. The carriers, the battleships, the cruisers, the destroyers, and then we were going all the way around protecting the fleet. And sometimes they sent us way up ahead, 100, 150 miles ahead of the fleet, to make sure that there were no enemy ships coming at us, and we could notify our Navy that they were on their way, what have you, and notify them of any kind of danger there might be. So we were always looking for submarines and detecting them and protecting our fleet. And the little yard minesweepers that we were escorting, the weather got kind of rough, and the little yard minesweepers, they're wooden vessels. You'd think they were going to sink, because it seemed like the waves would cover them up. All of a sudden they bob all the way up to the surface. They made it all the way, but it was rough weather for them. It was a real rough time. Well, we had the radar picket stations. There were 15 picket stations, and the destroyers were assigned to those. There might be some other carriers farther away and all like that, but we formed a radar screen all the way around Okinawa so that we could detect the Japanese airplanes coming from the mainland, and then we'd call up the Combat Air Patrol to come and try and shoot them down. In the meantime, we were targets for the kamikazes, and they would be diving at us. And the only way you could defeat a kamikaze is to shoot it down, because they'd keep on coming. Even though they were damaged, they're still coming at you. And so we had to blow them up before they could, and we were, God willing, we managed to survive all of that. But the Japanese didn't resist us landing. Right. It was after they fought us on the mainland. They were well established and had tremendous forces there. And the commanding officer of the Japanese got killed in Okinawa. And the commanding officer of the American forces, General Simon Bolivar Buckner, he went to review his troops in the front lines, and he got caught in a shelling. The Japanese started shelling the air, and he got killed by the barrage of the Japanese. Well, the first thing that we did, we went out on radar picket. They put us out on radar picket. And all night long, we fought the kamikazes and what have you, and called the Combat Air Patrol to come and do something about it. And they had what they called the Black Widows, were the name of the airplanes that the Marines had. They had fantastic radar, and the pilots always wore sunglasses, day and night, so that at night they could see better. And the so-called Black Widow airplanes had real fantastic radar. They could detect the airplanes at night real well. So they were the ones that were fighting the Japanese at night. Part of the duties that the crew have is to be a mess cook. Besides my radios and combat stations, I was assigned as a mess cook also, so I was feeding the food. And one fella came by and said, "Hey, I found some water in one of our forecastle lockers. There's water in there." And I went and looked. There's a big hole in a bow. So I went out there. Sure enough, there was a big hole. The locker was sealed, so it didn't damage any of the rest of it. Didn't flood any of the rest of the ship, just that little small locker in front. And so we asked permission to come in. So we came in, and they drained the water. They put patches on the outside because a torpedo went through from one side to the other without exploding. So they welded, patched up the holes and drained the water out of it. So we came in, and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 11 of our ships came in, all damaged, blown. The magazines were blown up. If I would have been in that ship, the magazine was blown. I would have blown up with it. And the deck was wrapped up against the forward gun was wrapped up against the forward gun turrets. One ship came completely cut in half, and they were dead all over the place. And the ship that took our place, it looked like a crocodile. The front deck was just up like that because the magazine blew up and just blew up the deck. So they were dead all over the place. And like I said, one of the ships was cut in half. It brought it in 2 pieces. Yeah, we went back up. We had to do our duty. That was why we were there, to be in a radar picket to knock out as many kamikaze airplanes as we could and notify the Combat Air Patrol, that they were coming to come and knock them down. Because we could detect them as soon as they took off from the mainlands of Japan. We could detect them right away. Then the Combat Air Patrol would come over and try to knock them down. One of the radar picket stations that we went with another destroyer called the Ditter. Well, 3 airplanes crashed into it. One airplane crashed alongside of us, and it let go of what we thought was the engine. Well, it damaged the auxiliary, electrical auxiliary system for our ship, so they sent us to the Philippine Islands to have it repaired. So, and everybody said, "Oh, it's the engine of the ship. It would have been a bomb, it would have exploded." So we went down to the Philippines, and the whole fleet was there getting ready to start shelling Japan. And so when we got there, we called an expert to come and take a look at what the hole was. Actually, it wasn't. We called him afterwards. We had our crew drain the oil where this particular piece of equipment had gone into, and they found a bomb in there that hadn't exploded. So we called a demolition expert. They came over from one of the carriers. and they took the fuses in the front and the back of the bomb, and the propeller didn't turn enough times because the airplane crashed and didn't have enough times to turn. If it would have turned twice, 2 more turns, it would have lined up 2 pins and would have blown up the ship. No, it crashed on the side of us, and the engine, we thought the engine had gone in the ship, but it was a bomb that went into our ship. We had it run out for 18 days going over to the Philippines, and when we went there to examine and drain all the oil, we found out it was a bomb. And the curious thing about it was that the bomb, before World War II, the United States sold a lot of surplus ammunition and guns and things like that to Japan. Well, that particular shell was a 16-inch shell that was converted into a bomb that the United States sold to Japan. And Japan put fins in it, made a bomb out of it, and it crashed into our ship. One of the things, you heard of friendly fire and what have you, one of the things, we had what they called proximity fuses in our shells. Instead of having a fuse that would explode up a certain height, we had what they call on the fuse of the shell, on the cone, we had what they call proximity fuses. They would come, and the radio activity of the engine would detonate the shell if it came within 25 feet of that airplane. So we were shelling those shells at them, and sometimes we wouldn't come in within 25 feet, and those shells would keep on going. And where were they going? To Okinawa, over there where our Marines were. You know, we were shelling, trying to shoot the airplane. All of a sudden, over there's the Marines, and we felt kind of bad about it. But we were hoping nothing happened to them. When the shadows were getting long and what have you, when the sun was setting, then they would start attacking, and that's when we were most vulnerable to see them. And we had our radar that controlled our guns, and we also have the guns fellows that were not under radar control that would shoot, manually. And at twilight it was the time. Well, at night too, they came around. I remember one time the fellows were very upset because there were kamikazes, and one kamikaze was coming at us, and the captain didn't order to fire. And the reason why, there were 5 airplanes circling above us, and they wanted us to fire so they could detect where we were, and then they were going to come and attack us. And the captain realized that. So when that kamikaze came over, he was trying to knock off our radar's antenna, but he missed it and kept on going, and we didn't shoot at it. But because we had 5 airplanes up there waiting for us to open fire so they could see us and crash into us. So we even backed up into our own wake so we wouldn't create more of a phosphorus illumination in the ocean. But everybody was all upset because of that, but then we found out there were airplanes up there waiting for us. And there were all kind of things happening. One airplane came and was coming down at our plane, and our captain moved the ship over, and the airplane knocked off the depth charges and broke the lifelines, and the depth charges went over the side and exploded, went down below, and the airplane crashed alongside of us and exploded also. And there was always danger everywhere, all the time. There was, I remember we also detected a submarine, and we dropped 72 depth charges on a submarine. And then you had to be very careful because the ship would rock and roll, and it was dark outside. The only thing you had to guide you with were little small plastic buttons on the deck that had fluorescent paste in them that would shine. And if you ever fell overside, by the time they found out that you weren't around, it'd be too late. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, all dark. By the time they tried to find you 2 or 3 hours later, they'd never find you. Yeah, the Aaron Ward got hit by the 5 kamikazes that came back, and we were really, really inspired by the fact that they kept the ship afloat because it looked like a submarine. The superstructure on the ship was practically all gone, and there was water going from one side of the ship to the other over the deck, and the ship came back. They brought it back in. The crew managed to bring the ship back in and survived. And there were other ships that, like I said, that time we had 11 of our ships come in, one of them completely cut in half. You had to give credit to all those damaged ships that managed to make it back. When we came back, the day after we got back, Japan surrendered. But before they surrendered, it took 2 bombs for them to surrender. So we dropped the atomic bomb, the first one when we came back, and the United States Navy government was telling us that we dropped an atomic bomb, and it was a very devastating bomb. And a lot of the fellows on the ship saying they never heard of atomic weapons or atomic energy. And they say, oh, it's just a doggone propaganda for the American government to make us feel like we have to keep on fighting with spirits because we're losing the war. That's the way they felt. We all felt that way because we were being damaged and see so much devastation by the kamikazes against us. It was a very devastating battle, and we felt like we were losing the war because every time we go up there, our ships were getting sunk and damaged, and people were dying all over the place. And I remember seeing carriers having the barrels at sea, and our ships firing at the Japanese and all of that. So it was a battle that really, really gave us, we had to survive, so we had to keep on going no matter what. And we were going through the toughest battle we could ever face. They were getting our wounded to go into a hospital ship. And the hospital ship came in completely white, with a big red cross on it, all lit up, came in to evacuate some of the wounded, and the Japanese came over and started attacking it. From being on radar picket, they gave us a break to come over and guard the mouth of Buckner Bay. We're going back and forth, and I didn't like it because we had all our supply ships were there, and the Japanese were coming in to attack them, and we couldn't fire because our ships were in the way. You know, Japanese come in flying between the ships, and we couldn't fire at them because we'd be hitting our own ships, and it was kind of dangerous. And then we had swimmers swimming around, climbing the anchor chains and throwing grenades at some of the ships, things like that sort. And I remember I was in the radar room, and this one message came over, and one of the fellows said, there's some naked nips here. They want to surrender. What should we do? And the answer came, said, remember, naked nips can still sink ships. We were out there on guard, you know, while our ship was slowly moving or anchored at the mouth. And we got a notice that there was one of our sailors fell overboard. And we would shoot at anything that's floating out there, boxed, anything, because there might be a Japanese underneath it swimming with it. So we would shoot at anything. And pretty soon we'd hear this. We heard that this fellow fell in the water, fell overseas, fell in the ocean. And all we heard was shots in different parts. Our own ships were shooting at this floating thing going by, which was one of our sailors. It was devastating. And so we were out there looking at everything and make sure that there were no Japanese coming to damage our ship. The only injury I had was when we went to Ulithi, and there was a big sign there, don't climb the coconut trees. And I climbed a coconut tree, and I threw the coconuts down to the fellows. So then I let loose, and I went sliding down the tree with this bark on the coconut tree, and it just ground the doggone my trousers into the inside of my legs, and I pushed myself away from it as much as possible. That's the only injury I ever got. There was one fellow, when the war ended, we were assigned to the East China Sea to sweep the mines there, escort the minesweepers and sweep the mines. And we were identifying the different areas with floating radar antennas. And so we would drop them down like we would with regular mines. But they had antennas on identifying the area that had been swept. Well, I was assigned to the officer of the deck midships, and there alongside of me, this far away from me, was a fella getting ready, the films ready. Of course, the war was over. We were going to see movies that night, so he was getting it ready. Well, the mines were dropping in the ocean, and behind us were some of this LSTs shooting at him. Well, a piece of shrapnel from way aft came over our ship and hit the fella right alongside of me, right on his head. That was it. The war was over, but he got killed right next to me. And then 2 days after the Japanese signed a treaty that the war was over, a kamikaze came over and crashed on one of our battleships. They just weren't, they couldn't communicate with them, or the kamikaze people were still very much against Stephen. And I read articles later on where even the armed forces were against Hirohito announcing that the war was over. They went into his castle trying to get a record that it was going to be broadcast the next day, trying to keep it from being broadcast. But the guard there managed to control him, and there were battles even among themselves. And then there were some other Japanese that were very much against Americans. And when MacArthur was going to land in Japan after the war was over, they were trying to assassinate him also. So there was all kind of crazy things like that happening even after the war was over. Because of all the action and all this, how we managed to still keep active, because we got damaged, but it wasn't as serious as some of the others, although at the end of the war, we got the bomb that went and got that bomb in there. But our ship got some kind of Navy commendation. But then after the war, they reviewed it over and they upgraded it a presidential citation. So our ship got the presidential citation for the action in Okinawa, and I have the honor of being able to wear that presidential citation as part of my uniform. Okay, this is the Pacific. We have 4 stars in it, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and then we swept the mines in East China Sea and the Straits between Shikoku and Kyushu. This is American Theater of War. I think this is the Philippine Islands liberation. And here they are. This is the Pacific. Oh, this is the occupation, because we were there in Okinawa, and there's another port that we were in for a while. The Philippine Liberation, the Victory Medal. That's the presidential citation, and the star on it means that I was aboard ship whenever they earned it. Well, I went back to school, to high school, and then I went to junior college in Fullerton, and then I went to work to support my grandfather and grandmother because he was close to 70 years old, and he couldn't speak English too well. Neither could my grandmother, although my grandmother was very well educated, and she could speak French and Spanish, but she was very poor in English, although she could, sometimes I thought she was reading something in Spanish. It was a newspaper in English, but she was translating it into Spanish all the time, but she couldn't pronounce the words too well in English. So in 1961, I moved over to Seattle, Washington, and I met my wife up there, and we got married, and she never wanted to leave Seattle, so I was there till the first of this year when I came back. And over there, I got involved with labor movement, political action. I became a delegate of the National Democratic Convention, had a picture with President Jimmy Carter, and was involved in that. The governor appointed to the Commission on Mexican-American Affairs there in Washington, and he appointed the other governor appointed me to the White House Conference on Aging. The mayor appointed me to the Public Safety Service Commission, which we were making sure that the proper kind of people got promoted. We would test them every 2 years, and anybody that wanted to be a police officer, we would give them a test and a background check, see how they were. I worked at the University of Washington Physics Department as an instrument maker. Before that, I worked in the Oceanography Department as an instrument maker there too, developing all the equipment for research. For oceanography, they needed special instruments, so we would make it for them. And then I transferred to physics, and in physics, it was more interesting. Their research was more elaborate. They would get money from the National Science Foundation to do all different kind of new research. And because it was so new, there was no equipment that they could buy, so we had to make it for them. And the equipment that we made for them was used in the Fermi Lab in Chicago. And south of Chicago is another cyclotron there called Neon. And then in New York, Good Haven was another cyclotron. And then we were making equipment for the Super Colliders cyclotron over in Texas. Everybody wanted it because Congress thought they might go in their own state. And even the Speaker of the House was from Washington. He was promoted and also. So finally, President Johnson had it established in Texas. When that happened, they cut all the funds. So they didn't finish the cyclotron. So we were making equipment for that cyclotron. So then our scientists went over to between Germany and Italy, in Switzerland, to a cyclotron over there. And so we made some equipment that went over to a city over there. I can't remember the name of the city right now, but they have a cyclotron there. And so we made equipment, and they went over there to conduct some of the experiments. And some of the experiments that we had, they attached them to some of the U-2 flights to detect the radioactivity over Russia. And then some submarines, equipment, researchers in submarines, they were way down the ocean bottom doing research to detect some of the radiation from the ocean floors, things like that. And then there were some kind of balloons that were flown from New Mexico around there, and then they would drop the samples, and they would examine them and find what kind of radioactivity or outer space debris was coming into our atmosphere, and all kind of things like that. Well, we went to a segregated school. In some ways, it sort of kept us from socially being involved with the rest of the community. So we were separated, and we were in our own culture, which was fine. But it taught a lot of the young people that couldn't speak English too well like me from socializing with some of the other people, other citizens of our country that were not Hispanic, so they would be able to know us better and us know them better, and so we could socialize and become more integrated. But once we went in the 7th and 8th grade in junior high school, I became the lead trombonist there. And in high school, the majority of the students in the band had to go to junior band for about a year. But the teacher, I guess he heard about me playing the trombone, so he had me out, and he said, "Okay, fine." He said, "You're now a member of the high school band. You don't have to go to the junior band." So I became a trombonist right away in my freshman year, and I became the first trombonist in high school. So I became very, very, very integrated, very, very much accepted because I was a leading trombonist. Yeah, there were some people that were racist in some attitudes, but you don't let them poison you. There's too many good people that you can work with and be with to let those people upset you. You just say them, you have your way of thinking, you better modify it, because that's not the way the country is. Justice and liberty for all, you know. So, and it gave me that kind of contributing attitude to be part of the country more than ever. And when in the service, it was more, because we're all putting our life on the line, and we all accepted each other. We're all dependent on each other, because we're facing the same dangers together. If one of us failed, it would create problems for the rest of us. So we all had to cooperate and work with one another, and we knew what they were going through, because we were going through at the same time. And not only the ship, you see the other ships out there? And they were defending us too. We were protecting them, and they were protecting us. So whenever we saw some casualties in the other ships, we felt it. We felt it real strong, because we knew we were all together trying to be victorious. And I didn't want the Japanese tyrannical, sadistic government come over and start mandating to my parents and grandparents and the whole family here and dictating the whole country and dominating. I wasn't going to stand for that. We were giving it all they had. It might cost us our lives, but that's the way war is. You get them before they get you. And you just do the best you can, the best as long as you can. I remember one time we had a real terrific battle with kamikazes. And the battle was over, and I was coming out of the ship, and we had shells stuck, empty cartridges. Not the cartridges, but they come in tin cans. We'd take the shells out, and we'd throw those metal tin cans, and they would all the way up to the ceiling, about that far up below the ceiling. And we had to crawl through all of that to get back on the main deck. And then they took them all out. And the fellow was saying, "David," said, "weren't you scared down there in that magazine? Aren't you afraid down there?" I said, "Yeah, we're all afraid, but we have to keep on going no matter what. I'm going to give it as much as I can, as long as I can, and there's no in between. I'm either alive or dead. There's nothing. If the magazine explodes, I'm going to be dead. I'm not going to be wounded or anything like that. So I'm going to just give it as much as I can, as long as I can, and you guys are going to do the same things. Yeah, yes, we're doing the same thing. So that's the way it was. You just have to face the truth. You just give it all you had as long as you can, and that's all you can do.